You're a simplifier, not a complicator.
Yes.
And you don't believe in budgets.
Budgets are an act of creative writing. I think budgets are useless. What's more important than a budget is growth.
I'd like you to just talk about your company, your processes, what made you different, why did you do it that way, and why did it make what you were doing special?
There are two leadership styles. I'm oversimplifying, but there's two leadership styles. There's people who lead by fear. Those leadership styles can sometimes have short-term success, but eventually end in failure. And there's the way I lead, which is you lead by example. And the way you lead by example is you treat people with respect and dignity, and you follow the golden rule. So when I built my company, I built a company based on the kind of place where I would want to be an employee. I was the owner, but I would always ask myself, if I was an employee, is this something that I would embrace? I'll give you some examples of some of the things I did. So I read a book by Jim Collins called Good to Great. In this book, there's a chapter called First Who Then What. There's a metaphor of a bus. You put the right people on the bus, you get the wrong people off the bus. And when you have the right people on the bus, you have to put the right people in the right seats. It's a wonderful metaphor. And as a leader, if you fail to put the people in the right seats, or if you fail to keep the wrong people on the bus, it's your fault. It's not the fault of the person you hired. It's your fault. It's your fault for not assessing them, for not realizing that they're wrong, for not realizing they're toxic, for not realizing they lack a set of skills that are necessary to do the job. It could be attitudinal skills, or it could be the skills of actually doing the job. In my company, we never fired anybody. We invited them to resign. Now, it sounds like a semantic difference, but it's actually a profound philosophical difference. Because when you fire someone, you're blaming them, you're pointing at them, you're saying it's your fault, you did wrong, you're bad. When you invite them to resign, you're saying it's not a good fit, and they will agree with you.
If they said why, you would just keep saying, look.
You never tell them why it's not a good fit, because they will agree that it's not a good fit, but they will not agree with why it's not a good fit.
You don't want them defensive.
You want them to be unemotional. Why? Because unemotional people do not call their best friend from high school, who's a lawyer, on the way home.
Right.
And so
What else did you do?
Risk management.
Right. As part of the process, again, because of your negotiation, you'd all thought this through carefully. So, well, I'm sitting with you. I've been with you 90 days, 6 months. I'm not a good fit. So what else happens during that?
Okay, right before, toward the middle of my business career in corporate creations, I stopped doing what I'm about to describe. I taught other people how to do it. But let's say I was doing it, and you are the member of my team, and so I'm the one having the conversation with you. So
there's someone else in the room
always,
too, right? Okay.
Always. And if I'm meeting with a woman, the other person in the room is a woman. Always. Okay. So, and before you walk into the room, I've called someone on my IT team, and your access to the computer system has been eliminated. So as you're walking from your computer to the room we're going to meet in, while that's happening, you've been shut out of the system. You cannot enter the system. Okay. We sit down. Charlie, thank you for meeting with me. I appreciate everything you've done with the company. It's not a good fit. You and the company are not a good fit. You're very talented in many areas, and I want to give you an opportunity to pursue your greatest strengths. And then I hand you a check that I already signed. I said, Charlie, that check is everything you're owed through the end of today. Let's say we're meeting at 10 in the morning. Then I'm going to say to you, Charlie, I'm going to help you any way I can. So whatever you do next, whatever you decide to pursue next in your career path, you can ask the person you're meeting with to call us, and we will say nice things about it. And so I've now given you a check. It's signed. You're paid to the end of today. And I say, Charlie, you can leave after this meeting, or you can stay in the office. We paid you through the end of today. If you decide to stay in the office, you can talk to anyone you want to talk to.
What about severance? Would you pay severance?
And then after I say all of that,
okay,
then I have another check that is not signed. and next to it is a one sentence letter. It's one sentence. It isn't even a letter. It's like on the top it says resignation. It says, "I, Charlie Garcia, have decided to resign my position at Corporate Creations effective immediately because I've decided to pursue other career opportunities." Period. That's all it
One
says.
sentence. Okay.
There's no lawyer language in there. There's
And it
no
has their
police
name and a
language.
line for to sign. There's
There's a
no
line with
legalese.
your name on it that's dated. So I say to Charlie, if you decide to sign this resignation, I'm going to sign this other check to say thank you and to help you. And in 30 years, I had one person not sign the resignation. One person.
And did you have some formula in terms of what the amount was,
It would
or was
depend
it
on how long the person had been with us. The longer we did this, the better we got at it. And we
right?
got to a point where we could identify people who were not a good fit within 30 days. But we were not as good at this at the beginning. And this is a
Right.
process of refinement and learning.
Right. But even if it was 30 days or
It could have been 2 days. I mean, if my leadership team identified you as toxic in 2 days, first of all, no one will say to you you're toxic. We're not going to have that conversation.
right, right,
We're just going to say it's not a good fit.
right,
We're going to give you at least 2 weeks.
right. So yeah, most companies don't do that, but that's again the golden rule. You're treating them respectfully.
Because you know why? You know whose fault it was that we hired a toxic person? It's our fault. It's not your fault.
Right, right, because you didn't do the diligence, you didn't check. They right. So then you get better over time. So that is one of the great things. You created a great work environment. Talk to us also about, and I want to hear this story again because when you hire corporate people in your company, those and senior management that come from big corporations, they always want to have a budget, and you got to submit your budgets before the end of the year, and then you have a budget. How are you doing against the budget and the plan? And you don't believe in budgets. Tell us about that and why that's worked for you.
But budgets are an act of creative writing. I think budgets are useless in any organization I've ever been affiliated with, whether I control it or not. I share this opinion. We always measured year to date performance compared to last year. So, what's more important than a budget is growth. And I've told you my growth objective, 15% a year. That was my growth objective. I didn't have a 50% growth objective because I thought that was stressful. And it's hard to maintain culture when you're growing that fast. So my company, our goal was 15%. Sometimes we grow less, sometimes we grow double, right?
Instead of having a budget, if you've said, okay, there's 12 months, I want to grow 15% a year, so you have to grow on average a certain amount.
So when I would look at my financials every month, I was always looking. So let's say today was the end of May, okay, and I'm looking at the financials from January 1 to the end of May. So I'm always going to compare those financials, and next to it will be a column showing me January to the end of May for last year. And then I have a column that shows me percentage growth. So my goal is to always compare last year to this year. And a budget is unnecessary because if you have a growth target and if you can achieve growth in the business, then the budget is useless. It wastes energy.
Right, but you also overlay that because you want to also make sure that your expenses are also, you're also very focused on profits on a monthly and yearly basis as well, and you're comparing that year to year too, right?
Yes, so I'm looking at a profit and loss statement. It gives
Because you're
me
about cash flow.
I ran my company on a cash basis, so I'm comparing my profit and loss statement year to date, comparing this year to last year. I'm looking at all the line items in the profit and loss statement, including all my operating expenses. And the very first number I look at is the bottom line net profit growth. So I'm looking at the net year to date. How's my net profit for the first 5 months of the year comparing to the net profit for the first 5 months of last year? Did that number go up or down? If the number went up, and if it went up a lot, I'm going to pay a little bit less attention to the operating expenses. But if that number went up less than I wanted it to, or if it went down, I'm going to dissect the operating expenses. And I'm going to look, and then I'm going to look at the line items with the dollar number that has the greatest delta. And I'm going to focus on those line items. And wherever you haven't looked recently, you're going to find the problem.
And this is also because you said you're a simplifier, not a complicator.
Yes. I'm gonna try and get rid of the noise. So I'm not gonna spend energy on something if my year-to-date profit compared to last year grew 20%. I'm not gonna spend energy looking at the operating expense line items. I don't
Right
need to.
now, Frank, if there was some tidal wave that came in from a competitor or regulatory change that in May you had a dramatic um, change from the year before. Let's say your growth and your profits were down 20% versus being up 15%. Then what would your approach be if you thought that this was going to affect your business for the rest of the year?
Well, that only happened to me once in 30 years, and it was the global financial crisis. So the global financial crisis, my company, for the only time in its roughly 30-year history, when I was the owner, um, had failed to achieve growth.
This is
And
07, 08, 09 timeframe.
yes, yes. So,
And then,
16,
and
yep.
right. And so how did you handle that? Or if you're talking in general to other people that have a startup right now or have a company and are
Right.
facing that,
So the way I handled that is I stopped paying myself and I retained all earnings. I literally stopped paying myself. Now, why could I do that? Because I've always lived below my means. Even now, I live below my means. Because I get pleasure out of experiences, not things. And so I stopped paying myself. I did not cut anyone's pay. I did not stop paying bonuses because I paid a team bonus every month. And I started watching all my operating expenses very carefully. And we made this a company-wide project to cut to the bone all the operating expenses. We got rid of all the things that weren't necessary. And what happens is you grow businesses, you forget about something that is kind of an automatic pilot, and it's a relatively small number, and you forget about it. But
they add
when you
up.
go through a global financial crisis, you cut that, and you start. And so we were able to actually, even during the global financial crisis, we were able to be in a position where we didn't grow, but we didn't shrink. So by the end, when I started seeing the numbers and we started focusing on cutting expenses to the bone, and I stopped paying myself, I'm the only one who stopped paying himself. Everyone else got paid. It sends a cultural message to the team.
Now let me ask you, there's some companies that wait for the end of the year, and if they're profitable and they make good decisions and they're going to bonus people based on, the value and how much, influence they have with the company and all that.
Those bonuses
You,
are useless. And they're useless because most people do not have a 10-year time horizon like I do. Now, there's exceptions, but I view the world in decades. Most people view the world in months.
so what did you do? What made your company very different? And I think transparency is also a big kind of cultural thing that you were able to
The first thing you do is you accept reality as it is presented to you, not as you hope it exists. And so it is a truism that most people do not view the world in decades. And most people don't view the world in years either. So why are you going to bonus every year? You're not motivating people. Because then they start to view that as an entitlement. And when people view a bonus as an entitlement, it stops motivating them. So what we did is we bonus every month.